Richard Branson once said, "The most talented people, the most thought-provoking and game-changing people in the world are never normal." In other words, in the world of creativity, normal is abnormal. Did you get that? Hello, welcome to the Muse. My name is Peace Adeniro. This is the show where we spotlight creative expressions in its full expression. I have my guest in the studio already, and I can't wait to delve into that conversation. If you're not yet followed us, you can follow us on all our social media platforms right now, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at ImpactTV and ImpactTV UK. There is many more to come on the show, so just sit back, relax, and enjoy while we go on this break.
Lanre Oke. Lanre Oke is a poet who has been published locally and internationally for the past 32 years. His involvement with the arts and entertainment began while he was in primary school, where he recited Ewi, which is the Yoruba oral poetry form on the then Western Nigerian Television Network, NTA Ibadan. In secondary school, he was a member and later leader of the Atilogu Dancers of the Federal Government College, Ilorin, Kwara State's foremost school dancing troupe and perennial winner of all the state's cultural competitions. He was also a member and later the leader of the school's literary debating team, also the state's prize winners. He began writing poetry about 35 years ago. While still in secondary school and as a full science student, he continued writing into his university years, even while studying mechanical engineering. He was eventually apprenticed to Mrs. Mabel Shegun, the renowned writer and educationist, when it became apparent that his attraction to poetry was more than a passing fancy. In 1992, right after his first degree, he won the Association of Nigerians Authors Prize for Poetry for his first collection of 60 poems titled Metamorphoses and Other Poems. Today on The Muse, Lanre Oke is our guest.
It is my delight to have Lanre Oke in the studio with me today. Hello, Lanre. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you here.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, should I say congratulations? You know, you won an award almost 30 years ago. You won a prize, rather, poetry prize, Anna Poetry Prize for your first book, that Metamorphoses. Metamorphoses is a collection of poems, short poems. So congratulations. How did you feel at the time?
It was exhilarating. I was outside Lagos then. I was in Makurdi in Benue State when I got the call that I had been shortlisted, or my collection, Metamorphoses and Other Poems, had been shortlisted for the Poetry Prize for that year. And then a couple of weeks later, I got another set of calls, this time from friends as well, saying my collection had won the poem, the prize rather. I couldn't make it to Lagos in time for the annual convention where the award took place. But a few weeks later, I was in the southwest, and I went to Ibadan to Ken Saruwiwa's office, where I met him and collected the prize certificate.
So it is safe to say that you wrote most of the poems in that book while you were still in school?
I wrote them right through my university years, yes.
How did you do it? Engineering is such a draining course, so to speak. How did you do it?
Well, poetry for me is an innate, spontaneous thing. I write in response to my environment and to stimulus. So the engineering was what I had to apply my mind to academically, the rigor, the library work, the coursework itself. But the poetry was spontaneous. In fact, at that time, when it became obvious to those responsible for me that the poetry was more than a pastime, I was apprenticed to Mrs. Mabel Shegun, the renowned author, and I used to travel regularly to her place in Ibadan, to present my scribblings and get tutored and all of that. So there wasn't a conflict beyond the fact that maybe one could argue that I had to divide my time. But I didn't sit down to labor over poetry. That happens, and still happens as a matter of spontaneity. It's just my environment, interactions, experiences stimulate me, and I produce poetry, yes.
So at what point did you discover that part of you, the poetry part? What was the discovery process like?
I'd always been into literature. Both of my parents teachers, they're university people. You know, my father was a professor of language and criticism. My mother is a university librarian. My father is late now, my mother's retired. So, you know, we had walls in my house with books. And as a teenager, I was reading books that people read for a PhD in university, you know, as my pastime, because this was all around me, and, you know, I was the book type. So I absorbed a lot of that. And towards the end of my secondary school years, I found out that, you know, I started scribbling stuff that was funny to me at first, and then later I found courage to share with one or two people. In fact, I remember in my final year in secondary school, I wrote a short story and gave it to my English teacher, and she literally swore that I was lying, that I took that story, I plagiarized that story from someone's novel. You know, I didn't understand the import of what she was saying at the time, but I think many years later, it hit me that she was that amazed at what I turned out. But I think it was the poetry that stayed with me over time. So from about the latter years of my secondary schooling, I started writing. And like I said, when I got into university and shared some of it with my father, and he reviewed it and talked to one or two of his friends, he came home to me one day and said, well, I spoke to Mrs. Mabel Shegun, and she said it's okay for you to come over and see her in Ibadan once in a while, and she'll give you some input on what you're doing. So I'd say maybe from my late teenage years, I've been writing.
Oh, okay. So let's talk about your book, among other things, which is also a collection of poems, and I must say a collection of thought-provoking poems. So there is this poem in it that caught my attention when I was reading it, Slave to Our Desires.
Yes.
What was the thought process writing that poem? Because it's really, it's so relatable, it's so thought-provoking. It's a poem you read and you sit down and examine your life. So what was the thought process? Well,
among other things, is my second collection. I wrote that towards the end of the next 10 years of my life, after the first collection, which won the Anna Prize. And those were perhaps the most cosmopolitan 10 years of my life. I literally traveled the world within those 10 years. I was working for one of the biggest multinational companies in the world then. We had to be in different parts of the world regularly to compare notes about what the organization was doing in different markets and understand what we could replicate in Africa. So, you know, I was in different parts of Europe, I was in the Middle East, and you know, many times I'd be out on the streets in these locations and I'd witness, you know, this same thing we see in Africa, which is people just milling back and forth, particularly after work hours on a weekday, you know, catching buses, catching trains, going home and all of that. And the experience in Europe in particular, you know, whenever I was, say, maybe in Belgium or in Germany or in Switzerland, you know, at the train stops or the bus stops, you know, after work, you just see hordes of human beings. But the difference with their situation to Africa is that in Africa you'd see a lot of interaction, a lot of rapport. Yes. People would be chatting, interacting. You know, in the European setting, everyone's just, you know, like some dot, you know, on a production line, just moving, catching the bus, catching the train. There was a soullessness about it that bothered me whenever I was there, you know, and it was the sort of thing that left me thinking every time I got back to my residence or my hotel room, is this the life people are going to live for 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Just go to work, get off the train, get on the train again, go back home, go to the store. It was just a, bland, soulless life. And for me, it just boiled down to we're doing all of this because of the needs we have to be able to acquire cars, get a house, put the children in school, buy whatever we'd like to acquire, TV. So these desires, these material desires, have consumed us such that we're unable to break out to do other things with life, and this was the perception that led to the writing of Slaves to Our Desires. Yeah.
So would you say there is an ideal life? Would you say there is a life that the way life should be lived, in your opinion?
I don't know if I'd call it ideal. I think it's different strokes for different folk.
Okay.
For me, I found my fulfillment in solving the problems of others.
Okay.
And maybe what that gives me as an edge on life is that I'm having to confront different circumstances and situations every time. And I think that variety fascinates me. And maybe that's why I was a bit concerned with that rather bland environment I used to interact with. So, but I guess there are people also for whom that safe, regimented lifestyle is the preference.
Okay.
They want that predictability. I want to be able to know I do this in the morning, I do this in the afternoon, I do this in the evening, and I'm fine. I like the routine. So maybe that for them is the ideal life. I think what it comes down to really is what turns your buttons.
At the end of the day, I think we are all slaves to something. It's just that it's okay. I mean, you should choose what you become a slave to.
You should.
Then in a normal situation, make sure what you become a slave to, so to speak, make sure it is worth the while.
And maybe transcends you. Maybe because all these material things we acquire, soon we die and we go away, and what's going to become of that car, that house? But I think if there's something that you're in pursuit of that blesses others and will outlast you, something you can put down, and maybe years after you're gone, people still come back and read it, touch it, experience it, use it, and it does good things for them. Again, some other people will tell you they don't care about that. Let me just take care of my child, and it's different strokes for different folk.
So there is this other poem in that collection. It's titled Better Life. And to be serious, when I saw the title, what came to my mind was 50 Naira. Because that is what 50 Naira used to be called in the times of Babangida, General Babangida. So let me ask you, what brought the poem about?
Well, I think a good place to start would be what the incident that inspired the poem. I was out on one of our highways in Lagos, and was told that a general's wife would be passing, and shortly afterwards the convoy did pass, and I counted 14 cars.
Wow.
And this was a time purportedly in the country then when we were supposed to be going through what was called the structural adjustment program, when we were all supposed to be belt tightening and minimizing costs. And I said to myself, what on earth is a general's wife going to do that she has to have 14 cars in her convoy? And the children's rhyme, the three blind mice thing, and all of that. One thing led to another, And for me, this is how poetry happens. It's an incident, it's a place, it's a person, and they inspire a certain imagery or connect with a certain message, and I just find myself writing, and that's how the poem came about. Yeah.
There's this thing about people around here in this part of the world. Let me just mention Africans. We love it when we flaunt it, so to speak. We love that show of extravagance, I have it, let me just, you must know that I have it. And not all of us, so to speak, but it's a general trait. Do you think that's not probably part of
I mean, obviously, that's who we are as Africans. We're community people. We like to carry a crowd. So that's, you know, a 1-year-old has a birthday party and you think it's someone getting married. You know? It's just we carry a crowd, and we like size in whatever we do. You know, you must bring numbers to it. It shows your importance is measured by how much of a crowd you can carry. You know, in other parts of the world, it doesn't work that way. I guess it makes us unique. You know, maybe part of what inspired the poem at the time also was that this was a time when there was clearly in the political fabric some level of inconsistency of what we were seeing with what we were being told. You know, that we couldn't reconcile, and for me, that was part of the metaphor that I was trying to express in the poetry. Yeah.
Okay, so before we round this off, is there a central theme for the book?
Well, you know, the subtitle, the main title of the book is Among Other Things. The subtitle says Poems for People and Places. And like I said, this was a period of intense and varied interaction for me here and in other parts of the world. I mean, you have sections in the collection that looks at people, sections that look at events, sections that look at places, and then some fixed members of the universal family. For example, I had a section on mothers and wives because they occupy a very key place, you know, in the family. And for me, these were evocative experiences. I mean, I wrote a poem in there for my own mother, which is for mother, which I wrote one of the times I was far away in Makurdi thinking about her. You know, I wasn't even thinking to impress her with it. I just missed her at the time, and then I wrote the poem, and I remember showing it to her maybe a year or so later, and she was so, you know, touched by it, you know, and I guess it came from the heart. So the collection really looks at pieces that came from interactions that I had with people, with places, with things that stimulated, you know, some imagery, stimulated some message in me that I thought I needed to put out there.
Oh, wow, this is a very interesting conversation, I must say. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We are not done yet. Let's just take a breather right now, then we come back and read excerpts from the book. Do not go anywhere. So let's move on to the next poem. The title is Lonely Path. So I'll be taking the first stanza and you take the second and the last stanza. Okay, let's go. For tomorrow at dawn, 2 cockerels plucked clean of their tanned feathers, dipped in the offering oil, dripping red.
2 bullocks fattened by castration and never tied to stake or plowshare, smooth unblemished hide, spanning their awesome bulk. Tomorrow at dawn, 2 fingers painted red with crimson dye and pointing forward over the obstacles, littering this lonely path.
Wow. What inspired this poem?
This one is an interesting one. I read a lot of Okibo.
Okay.
Christopher Okibo. I think he singularly influenced me more than any other poet. His, the strength of his imagery and his economy of words, you know, influenced me. And I just read one of his collections where he had painted a bleak picture of what I perceived to be Nigeria at that time, probably based on his perception of issues and all of that. So I wrote this in my own way as a kind of response. It's evocative. So what I was suggesting was that there would be a sacrifice to lead us into the future, past this lonely place, that the other author had described. So, and that is where the for tomorrow comes. So for tomorrow, prepare this sacrifice that's going to point us beyond this lonely path, this bleak place. Nigeria has been through its seasons. And this was at a time, like I was saying earlier when we were talking about the 14 government cars, that this was a time when there was quite a bit of disenchantment with the way things were in the country. And everyone was trying to see our way through to a better Nigeria. And maybe it's also instructive for this time because we're again at this crossroad type situation, and you always think the country will not survive. But, thank God one way or the other, the country asserts itself and moves past, because these were quite unhappy times to those who were, aware and around at the time with, the way the country was being run, with the challenges with governance, with the economy. But somehow we came out of it. And so, hopefully this time as well we'll come out of it again.
Yeah, after this, the sacrifices have been made already, so to speak. Yeah. So apart from Christopher Okigbo, who are the other people you look up to?
Oh, well, I'm from the community. Like I told you, both my parents are academics, so this is my neck of the woods. So some of these people are like uncles and aunties to me. I grew up, knowing them personally, people like Kolio Motosho, people like Wole Soyinka, people like Odia Ofemun, people like Femi Oshofison. These are all my daddies and uncles. Never mind that I'm calling, but in the literary world, you address people. Their names are their brands. And even internationally, Kofi Awono, Buchi Emecheta, and a lot of these are prose, but it was a lot of the material that I imbibed. Even John Pepper Clark, An interesting thing used to happen when I was in secondary school. I attended a federal government college, so you got to school at the beginning of the session and they gave you all your books. And I would go to my arts contemporaries when we were in the senior years in Form 4 and 5. I would go to my arts friends and collect all their literature and poetry books. When they just give us our books. And I'll spend the first 2 weeks of the term reading their books for leisure. I'd just read their poetry books, read their literature books, and then return to them before going to face my chemistry, maths, maths, physics. That was leisure reading for me. I soaked up that stuff. So all these authors contributed one way or the other to my having material to put out at the end of the day. Dambudzo Makerere from South Africa, Doris Lessing, Amata Aido. Yes, I mean, we had walls in my house all the way up to the roof that were, to the ceiling rather, that were filled with books, shelves of books.
Wow.
So, like I said, I didn't know at the time. I found out later some of the books I was reading were books that my father used to supervise PhD theses of. So, one that stood out to me particularly that I really loved was a Russian writer called Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And Solzhenitsyn wrote prose the way people shoot films. Solzhenitsyn wrote prose that could hold as many as 30 to 40 characters.
Wow.
And he would treat each character with a uniqueness that awes you. I mean, it's like you're in the story with him as it's going on. It's not like you're reading a book. That's
a lot of characters to manage for an average writer.
It's unbelievable.
Wow.
Each time I read, and he writes big books, not slim, not what they call penny novels, the way James Hadley Chase kind of. Yeah. So when you read things like that, they help your mind gain a structure for literature, for creative work. So all of these authors, I've probably not mentioned half of them. Naguib Mahfouz, an Egyptian author, I read at some point. I used to look for his books. As a very old man, even back then. I think he's been dead a number of years now. But these were seminal authors. Usman Semben, Kamara Laye, there's so many of them.
So many of them.
So many of them, yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this with me, but we are not done yet. We're still going to head along to play the game. So let's go on this quick break, after which we'll come back and play games. Just stay with us, okay? Welcome back from that short break, and this is the part I love the most. Welcome to the game segment, and I will be playing this game today with Lanre Oke. I'll be playing our game, and we're going to determine the winner. I'm sort of nervous, but all right, so this is the game. Are you ready?
I am.
So this is the game. It's a word construction game. So I say a word, so I'm starting. I say a word, you pick the last letter of my word. That will be the beginning of your own word. I pick the last letter, makes it the beginning of my word, and then it goes on and on until someone misses out. So when someone misses out, we move to level 2. Level 2 will be the last 2 letters. Level 3, the last 3 letters. Are you ready? Now these are the rules of the game. No hesitation, no freezing, no stuttering, no 2-letter words, no 3-letter words. Are you ready?
I am.
Why did you sigh? Okay, so let's go. My word is opportunist.
Tremendous.
Synergy.
Young.
Gangster.
Robust.
Tyranny.
Human.
Okay, I froze. But I wanted to say narcissistic. But I froze. All right, so Lanre has won the first level of the game. Let's move on to the second level, the last 2 words. So let's use your word this time.
Okay.
I mean the last 2 letters.
The last 2 letters. Vanity.
Tyrant. Hey, I said that before. No, are you telling me that I've lost 2 rounds? So let's move on to level 3. Remember, level 3 is the last 3 letters of the word. So your word is relevance.
Ancillary.
Sir?
Ancillary, but I know that's wrong. Because it's, I don't know any word that starts with NCE.
There is no word that starts with NCE, and I'm so happy.
So I used the last 4, but even that was ANCI, not ANCE.
Okay, so I have 1 point. You know, it's not easy having any point. If you think it is easy, come on the show and play the game. Duh. But the truth is, Lanre won on the game segment of today's episode, and I'm so happy for him right
Thank
now.
you.
Let me clap for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
A round of applause for yourself.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for playing this game with me. But we are not done just yet. Let's go on a quick break. I will be back shortly. Lanre will not leave the show today without observing the tradition on the Muse. We have a tradition of the guest coming to sign the Muse board, our Muse board, telling us that, okay, we were here, you know how we used to do it. So Lanre, please get up now, go to the board, sign it, and then come back and sit.
Okay.
Thanks so much for coming, and we also want to have a memory of you with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And on behalf of the team, I present this to you as a show of our appreciation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. We appreciate you. And also this.
Okay. Thank you
so
very much.
Is it
Thank
beautiful?
You. This is very nice. Very nice.
Thank you so much for coming. The team appreciates you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being with me from the beginning of the show, and special thanks to the Repartee for styling me, as well as Nigeria Hair Factory for this beautiful weave on my head. And thank you very much for everyone who came together to make this show a success, the people behind the scenes as well. You can follow us on all our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at ImpactTV and ImpactTV UK. Till I see you again next week, my name is Peace Adeniro. Ensure that you take care of yourself. Bye-bye.